In today's film, Gone Girl, we see the dynamics of the broken marriage between Amy and Nick, which slowly turns into a story muddled with a murderer husband and a wife assumed to be dead. Amy, our protagonist, is a loving, considerate wife, but under her false act, she's a calculating, self-absorbed psychopathic killer. Her husband, Nick, has been growing concerned about their marriage falling apart. Nick had finally decided to ask for a divorce, but he was in for a surprise. On their 5th anniversary, the growing tension has escalated, and Amy had gotten Nick to go out of their house, and she had the house all to herself. Nick goes to a bar he owns and where his sister works, and he sits there and drinks and talks to his sister about his troubles before heading back home. When he gets there, he's met with an empty, ransacked house. Thinking that the house was broken into, he immediately calls the police. A detective, Rhonda, shows up, and she seemed a little suspicious of him after going through the house. Here we begin to see Amy's account of their love story from the diary she kept. When they first met, they clicked right away, and they got married after 2 years of dating. Nick proposed to her the day of her mother's children book signing. This book, Amazing Amy, was based on Amy, and she'd been upset that the girl in the book had gotten married before she did, but Nick fixed that for her by proposing. Their marriage was fairly perfect. A couple of years had passed when there was a recession, and they both got laid off from their jobs. Her mother loses her book deal as well. Although Amy had a trust fund from her childhood, they needed the money to survive, but she gave the money to her mother, and the problems in their marriage only started to pile up after. In the present day, Nick is being questioned in the police station, and his calm demeanor is not helping him as the police are now more suspicious of him. As they ask him questions about her, he tells them that she kept to herself a lot and didn't really have any friends, and he can't really think of anyone who might want to harm her in any way.
Wait, hold on. Did you subscribe to our channel? Come on guys, you're here, you're watching the video. Help us out by hitting the subscribe button, as it really helps out me and my team to make more videos for you guys. And now, let's get back to the recap.
And later he calls her parents and tells them that she disappeared. In the station, he unexpectedly sees his own father in one of the rooms, and the policewoman with his father tells him that he wandered off from the nursing home again. He drives his father home and goes back to the station, and there Rhonda tells him that she wants him to give a press conference about Amy's disappearance. And that night, he stays at his sister's house. The next day, he and her parents give the press conference, and later, Rhonda questions Amy's parents, and they tell her that there have been 2 men who used to stalk her. One of them was called O'Hara, Desi. All of this becomes very overwhelming for Nick, and the media outlets pick him apart. The following day, while the police are at his house, Noelle, who claims to be Amy's best friend, shows up. While we go back to their past love story, after going through their money problems, Amy and Nick find out that Nick's mom is sick. Nick then has them move to his old town to be closer to her, and there, she buys him a bar, and Nick starts teaching creative writing, and Amy stays home. But shortly after, his mom dies, and one night, Amy suggests that they should have a child, and it might make things better for them. Nick somehow gets upset by this and pushes her, and afterwards, she becomes increasingly scared of him, and she decides to buy a gun to protect herself. In present day, the police give the house a luminol test, and they find blood, and they find that the kitchen floor is covered with blood and it's been cleaned carelessly. One day, when they were searching the house, they find an envelope that says Clue 1 on it. When they show it to Nick, he tells them that it's a treasure hunt game Amy sets up for Nick to play during their anniversary. Rhonda tells them that they need to solve it in order to figure out what Amy was doing before she disappeared. The clue leads them to his office, and at his office they find a second clue and a woman's underwear. After reading the second clue, he tells Rhonda that he doesn't know what it means, but later that night, he secretly goes to the place in the second clue, which happens to be his dad's cabin. When he gets there, he gets the third clue envelope, but Rhonda suddenly walks in as she'd been following him secretly. He tells her nothing and walks right back to his car and drives off, and back at his sister's place, he can't figure out what the third clue means. Later at night, Margot, his sister, was sleeping, and his phone buzzes and he reads a text that says, "I'm outside." He opens the door, and Andy, his girlfriend, who was formerly his student, walks in, and we find out that he's been having an affair with her for about a year now. When Andy leaves in the morning, Margot confronts him about lying to her, and she tells him that it will make him look bad and even more guilty if the police and the media learn that he's been having an affair. The next night, Amy's parents had prepared an event to speak to some locals to help them find Amy. Nick starts to speak and he reassures everyone that he would never hurt his wife. Noelle shouts and asks whether or not he also wants to tell them that she was pregnant. Shocked by this information, Nick concludes his speech and goes off stage. Back at his house, Rhonda follows him in and questions him, and she proceeds proceeds to show him financial records and talks to him about how he was making big purchases on TVs and golf clubs. He denies these allegations, and then she shows him a life insurance document that he had made changes to make Amy's life insurance higher. She also tells him that they will find out if she was really pregnant from her medical records, and he tells her that he won't talk any further without his lawyer present. At this point in the movie, Nick is convinced that Amy is doing this on purpose, and he goes back home and tries to solve the third clue, and manages to figure it out and goes to Margot's woodshed. There, he finds the TV and other things that Rhonda had asked if he had purchased. He tells his sister Margot and shows it to her, and she tells him to get a lawyer named Tanner who specializes in these kinds of cases. The next day, Rhonda was searching Nick's dad's cabin, still unsure why he was there that night and suspicious of the way he acted. They go to the basement and find Amy's diary a little burnt. And surprisingly, on our next scene, we see Amy in an old car driving down a highway. Apparently, she hasn't disappeared and she's not hurt at all. And here we also understand that she's actually trying to frame Nick for her murder. She felt as though that she was being taken for granted and that he was using her for her money, and when she went one night to his bar in order to surprise him, she saw him with Andy walking out and kissing. Then she knew that he wanted a divorce but was afraid to ask for it, and she was furious. And so, she went back home and started planning a fake murder. She first befriended Noelle and made up stories of abuse to tell her and stole her piece since Noelle was pregnant. She then put all the clues together and bought an old car with cash and waited for the day of their 15th anniversary. The morning of their anniversary, while he was away, she drained her own blood and splashed it all over the cabinet and poured it all over the kitchen floor. She then cleaned the blood carelessly so that the police would find it and think that it was Nick. And her original plan was actually to off herself once everything was done. Once she had left, she got a cheap motel, she cut her hair and dyed it, and changed her appearance. She then hits herself with a hammer that she found in the drawers. Amy then prepares a calendar for the things she's going to do. At this cheap motel, she meets Greta. They spend some time together, and Greta's boyfriend also starts hanging out with them. One night, she walks back to her motel and looks at her calendar and picks up the phone and tips the police about a suspicious activity at Margot's woodshed. One night, while Amy was playing mini golf with Greta and her boyfriend, they notice all her money in her waist bag. And because they noticed it, one night, Greta and her boyfriend forced their way in and take all her money. At this point, Amy was feeling very desperate and she calls Desi, her stalker, who we later find out never stalked her at all. Desi, wanting to rescue her, sets her up in his expensive lake house and gives her everything she wanted, but after a while, she realizes that he wants her to be with him. Although she tries to get out of his advances, he still kept pushing her, urging her to give him a chance. Meanwhile, Nick goes to see Tanner and hires him. Tanner tells him to go see O'Hara and Desi. He meets with O'Hara, and O'Hara tells him that he tried to break up with her, but then she framed him for rape and he got flagged as a lifetime offender. Then Nick goes to see Desi, but Desi refuses to talk to him because of what Amy told him. One night, Amy watches Nick's interview with great attention. Nick apologizes for his infidelity and asks Amy to come home if she's out there. Amy hears this and is pleased, and she makes up her mind to frame Desi for the kidnapping and to kill him and go back home. After the interview is aired back at Margot's house, Rhonda brings a search warrant and goes through the woodshed and finds the purchases that they had found on the financial statement, and they arrest Margot for being an accomplice. Back at the station, they bring Nick in, but this time he's with Tanner. Tanner tries to guide him, and Rhonda questions him about Amy's diary, and he denies everything. He tells her he didn't know the diary existed and that he never pushed her or made her feel unsafe. And then an officer calls Rhonda outside, and they hand her a tool they found at the fireplace that Nick had apparently used to hit Amy with. And because of this newfound evidence, Nick gets arrested. But Tanner manages to get him and Margot out on bail, and he advises Nick to go on a show and talk about his affair openly to make it public before Andy does. Meanwhile, when we take a look at Amy, the next day, as Desi was about to leave, she bites his lips and messes up his clothes so that he would be seen like that on the camera outside. She makes herself look abused and gets herself filmed. She then prepares until he comes home and then attempts to sleep with him before slitting his throat. And the day after, she drives home all bloody and Nick comes out to meet her. She testifies that she'd been kidnapped by Desi, and back home she tells Nick to play his part, but she sees that he's determined to leave her after all of this blows over. Although she tempts him to sleep with her, he refuses, but then she impregnates herself with some sperm she had saved from the fertility clinic back when she was trying to get pregnant. She then forces him to go on TV and announce that they are more in love than ever and that they're going to be parents. And the movie ends with him now trapped with a wife he doesn't trust and a child he's always wanted and is not willing to abandon. That is it for our movie today, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed this recap. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and also subscribe to my channel because I'm awesome. And I promise to see you guys on my next recap. I love you all. Bye.